Hour.
On the podcast, in a contest of wills, it's always best to fight the psionic with a long spoon. Meteoric rise from the black hole of despair leaves Cherenkov radiation of bluish-green delight. Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Uncompromising Honor. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm Baen Senior Editor Tony Daniel. This time we talk to David Mattingly, science fiction and fantasy cover illustrator extraordinaire, who has done probably hundreds of Baen covers over the years, as well as covers for many other publishers, both in and out of the genre. He was also the head map painter for Disney for a while. At Baen, he's best known as the artist who does the Honor Harrington covers. So stand by for David Mattingly. And we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor, for which, of course, David Mattingly provided the cover. We have an April ebook sale, and it's a doozy of bargainiferous proportions. King Jerry's Spaceship, April Jerry Pournelle ebook sale. To celebrate the new Starborn and Godsons mass market edition, we are dropping prices on all Jerry Pournelle ebooks. $2 off the ebook for Starborn and Godsons by Jerry Pournelle, Larry Niven, and Stephen Barnes, and $1 off ebooks such as The Legacy of Heorot by Jerry Pournelle, Larry Niven, and Steve Barnes, and Beowulf's Children. Those are the two sequels to Starborn and Godsons. The Best of Jerry Pournelle, edited by John F. Carr, is also $1 off. Mamelukes, Janissaries, Lord of Janissaries, Footfall, and oh so many more. Anything the late, great Jerry Pournelle had a hand in, we are discounting at the Baen website and across all of our ebook retailers. So check it out. Sale ends April 30th. You also have a few more days to get in on the Baen April contest. Fool me once. April contains April Fool's Day, but we aren't joking when we say Will McCarthy's new novel, Rich Man's Sky, is sure to please science fiction readers. But we'd like to get into the spirit of the holiday, so we're asking you to write us your best trillionaires in space joke, based on the concept of McCarthy's novel. The writer of the joke that makes us laugh the loudest or groan the hardest will win a signed copy of Rich Man's Sky. Send your entry in the body of an email to contest@baen.com by April 20th. Put April Contest in the subject field, and remember to include your name, by the way. Winner will be selected by the Baen editorial staff. Depending on how risque it is, we will even publish it as part of the announcement of the winner. I want to welcome David Mattingly back to the podcast after several years.
Thank you, Tony.
David. David Mattingly was born in Fort Collins, Colorado. He set his sights on being an artist at a young age. He also started reading Edgar Rice Burroughs as a youngster because his parents gave him the middle name of Burroughs. After finishing at, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, after finishing at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California, David began his career as a matte artist at Walt Disney Studios under Harrison Ellenshaw. And I think Harrison Ellenshaw's father was also a famous matte artist you knew.
Yeah, he was one of the best painters I've ever seen. Later in life, he also became a gallery artist, and his seascapes are just unbelievable. I mean, they're absolutely wonderful.
So ultimately, David became head of the matte department of Disney, where he worked on The Black Hole, Tron, Dick Tracy, and a bunch of others, I think. David has produced over 2,000 book covers, and he just says he just stopped counting at that point. He's worked for Bantam, Daw, Del Rey, Dell, Marvel, Omni, Playboy, Signet, and has found a home at Baen Books, of course, where he is most known for illustrating the New York Times bestselling Honor Harrington series by David Weber. He's the two-time winner of Magazine and Booksellers Best Cover of the Year Award, and he won the Association of Science Fiction Artists Chesley Award, which is a big one for science fiction artists. David is the author of the Digital Matte Painting Handbook, the first guide to digital matte painting, which he uses as a textbook for his matte painting classes at the School of Visual Arts and at Pratt Institute. I believe that's 2 colleges, right?
It is, yep.
Okay. He's married to Kathleen Cogswell. They live with 2 cats, Jackson and Juliet, in a very cool loft studio near New York City, which I've had the honor of visiting. It's really cool there.
Oh, thank you.
Is that behind you? You're in your studio, right?
Yeah, and this is actually a live background.
See how cool it is.
The top 3 layers are books, all books that I've done, and then at the very top there are my action figure collection. And some of those are action figures that I had as a kid. I didn't save them since I was a kid, but some of them have been reproduced. Like I have the Captain action figures that I played with when I was, 10 or whatever. And now I bought a lot of them from Sideshow, which they're, when you were a kid, you'd buy these 12-inch action figures and they'd be what, $10 or something. And now the Sideshow things are very expensive. They're a couple $100. So I keep them out of the paws of young visitors to my studios.
I see. Very high. By the time they get that tall, they know that they're valuable.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's so many things we could talk about. I mean, in many ways, you're like the quintessential science fiction cover illustrator at this point in your career. I thought maybe we could narrow it down to just some like your process, and so we could talk about how you might create a cover from the beginning, when you get a request to you start trying to brainstorm the concept. How do you do that? To how do you keep creativity going throughout the process, and how do you interact with our art department's pretty easy, but not everyone is so easy. It consists of Tony Weisskopf saying whether she likes something or not. But so let me just, I mean, we could talk about a cover in particular if you'd like to. I have a bunch of Mattingly books here that he did the covers on. Have about 1 billion of them here. All I did was walk through our shelves and started picking off things that look like David Mattingly.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just started finding. Whoa, shoot! I messed up my camera. I'll get that back. Hold on.
Yeah, you went very psychedelic there. Yeah, I've done a lot of covers for Steve Miller and Sharon Lee.
Yeah,
also,
you're the Liaden guy as well as the Weber guy, of course.
Yeah.
Among others. What else we got here? And you've done some other great covers. Like I have that Bug Park cover, which I think is a great little cover that you did years ago.
Yeah, one of my early digital covers. Jim Baen was very interested in digital work, and there's, I had 20 years of painting traditionally, so I have physical paintings, a lot of the physical paintings still in my studio. And then right around the time I got married to Kathleen, I asked my brother for a loan because I couldn't afford to buy a computer at that time. And he loaned me $10,000 and I bought a computer that I was able to do my earliest digital covers on. And one of those was Bug Park, which it has, 3D models, and then it has painting. So all of the covers that I do now are done in Photoshop, basically, along with some 3D models in them. So as to your question as to how I go about doing a cover, I always you get sent the manuscript, and now they're generally sent as a Word document. And I read the book all the way through, and I consider it one of the luxuries of science fiction is that you generally get a manuscript. In other parts of illustration, they cover conference and they basically give you the idea, and then you have to you sort of have to use their idea, and sometimes you don't even get a chance to read the book. In science fiction, it's long been a tradition that they don't cover conference. You read the book ahead of time and decide what you're going to do. And then I put aside the book. I tried the book all the way through just for pleasure. And this was something that Kelly Freas talked about, that he generally would read a book twice. He'd read the first time just for pleasure, and then the second time taking notes as to scenes that might be possibly illustrated.
Now, we should remind people that I mean, everyone should know who Kelly Freas is, but he's one of the absolute greats.
Yeah, he was. He worked for Analog back in the 1950s, and there's a couple of books of his work out. And I spent, a good time at conventions with him, and that's where I learned this thing. It basically, he felt that if you read the book constantly taking notes the first time through, you weren't able to get attached to the narrative and kind of fall in love with the book. And it's important for me to enjoy the book as I'm reading it. I had an experience early in my career when I was working for Judy Lynn Del Rey, who was one of the great science fiction editors. She basically, Del Rey Books was named after her and her husband, Lester Del Rey. And I got a book that I absolutely hated. And I was kind of feeling my oats and feeling like, well, I'm an illustrator now. I can go in and tell Judy that there's some morally objectionable stuff about this book, and I just didn't like it. And she said, David, first of all, you're not a literary critic, you're an illustrator. And I frankly don't care what your opinion of the book is. And I said, but Judy, there's nothing in this book to illustrate. And she said, there's a spaceship in it, isn't there? And I said, yeah. She said, well, draw a spaceship. So, now if I don't really love a book, I still feel that it's my obligation as an illustrator to try and give it the best cover I possibly can. So after I've read the book and then studied it for potential scenes, I think the best covers for books are not of a particular scene. And every now and then I will do a cover that's of a particular scene. If there's a scene that is just so outstanding in a book and just so obvious that you've got to illustrate that scene, that's fine. But what I really want to do is encompass the entire book, so that you would look at the cover and you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, I know exactly what scene that is, but that cover could only go on that book. And actually, one of the things that I've sort of struggled with is a lot of times my covers are very specific to particular books. And when you look at other illustrators, another illustrator who I really admire, who's passed away, named John Berkey, his books, you could take a cover from one of his books and put it on 10 other books because they weren't narrative specific. And my covers tended to be narrative specific. I would read through carefully and try and get the details of what the characters looked like, and put those onto my covers. So a lot of times my covers can't be slapped on other books once they've been on the book that was supposed to illustrate them. And I actually, I think that's kind of a good thing. And that was one of the things that illustrator N.C. Wyeth, who was Andrew Wyeth's father, and he was an illustrator back in the 1920s, and he did Treasure Island and a lot of these other books. And he didn't like illustrations, and he would actually have plate illustrations in these books. And let's say he'd have 10 of them, plus the cover, plus the end papers. And he generally didn't want his illustrations to be of a particular scene in the book. He wanted to catch the feeling of the book and do all that. So after I've read the book, then I'll sit down generally with a sketch pad and start trying to flesh out good ideas. And then once I have reasonably good ideas, I'll scan those into the computer. And then I'll work over that, applying color to it, because it's so much easier to, like, if you have a cover idea that's halfway good, you can then take that and then duplicate it over and then paint over it. And I can't tell you how many times when I was working traditionally, or was like, oh, I got a new idea, I'm going to try something else, and I would work over that thumbnail, and then I'd look at it and I think, gee, I wish I had that original version of it left now, because I don't like this new version that I've just created. So working digitally allows you to duplicate and duplicate things, and then it frees you up to
you still start with a sketch, you say?
I do, yeah. Even though I have a Wacom tablet, this is the digitizing tablet, and every time a new version of this tablet comes out, they say that it's gone from 512 levels of sensitivity to 1,000 levels of sensitivity to 2,000 levels of sensitivity, and they still haven't been able to produce something that has the level of sensitivity of a pencil, right? I mean, a pencil, it's just so wonderful. You can indicate things so easily, and you're not tied to the mechanics of the project. And also, since I had all those years of working traditionally, it's kind of bled over into my digital work. If you were a digital native, I probably bet those artists don't start with a pencil to get their thoughts down. But I'm just kind of used to that.
What do you tell your students to do?
Well, I teach matte painting at School of Visual Arts, and I also teach compositing. And I'm always interested in trying to get them to sketch things. And on several of my assignments, they have to come in with a concept. And students today are constantly taking photographs of things and then dropping them into the composition. And when I'm sketching, I never allow myself to use photographs. Like you can find very quickly inside of Google 100 different beautiful skies, and they're going to look better than the skies that you sketch. But if you plop in that beautiful live sky, everything else you sketch in the sketch doesn't look as good as that photograph sky that you put in. So I try and get my ideas down completely without using any photography, and then I will use photography to flesh out the final cover.
What are you thinking when you're doing this? That's what I mean, because I could sit there and watch you, and I could try the same thing, and of course it wouldn't happen. So, what in that initial moment when, all right, you've just read the book, do you let it sit a while, or do you just go at it?
I do. Yeah. Every now and then I read a book that has such an obvious scene that I just dive right into doing that, and sometimes that can be kind of a problem, because I try and force myself to submit 3 or 4 sketches to Tony, and if I get down right away the idea that I think is obviously the best, it's harder to produce those other sketches. I force myself, because you just never know if the next idea that you flesh out is going to be better than the previous one. And if you go with your first idea, you never get that full exploration of what the book has to offer.
So there's a sort of rigor that you apply to yourself at that point. You don't just let it go.
Yeah, I think that this thing of forcing myself to come up with multiple ideas for every book. That's something I've done throughout the entire course of my career. And early on in my career, there was an expectation that you were going to produce 4 sketches for every book. And my very first client was Don Wollheim, who had DAW Books. Yeah. And I was living in California at the time, and there was all that fun of mailing in the 4 sketches, and then it would come back, and he would have mused over the 4 sketches, and that he wasn't. The thing that is probably hardest on an artist is when an art director says, "We'll take this element from that sketch and then combine it with this element from this other sketch." I'd much rather have them say, I like this sketch or I don't like this sketch, but combining multiple sketches a lot of times becomes problematic. It's hard to make a good image, and a book cover, you really don't have that much room for a lot of information on it, right? The top third is always filled up with type. And then when I'm doing David Weber's book, I'm aware, David's name is a huge selling point. So I know that his name is going to be big on the book. So there isn't a lot of room for a whole lot of stuff on the cover. So you've got to find something punchy that will sell the book. And I also want it to represent the book so that the author will be happy with it.
All right, and so you've got your sketch. Well, all right. I want to look at one of these as we're going. Actually, maybe we could look at the one you signed for me.
Oh yeah,
Tony,
you're out of focus.
I know. Hold on a second, I'll get it back.
There we go.
Can't really. I have but this is by the way on above my desk at work.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's one of my 3 or 4 favorite covers.
I believe this is an Honor Among Enemies.
Honor Among Enemies, right? And there's kind of a funny story to that. I actually submitted that sketch for another book, for a book by Elizabeth Moon. And I guess it was Tony who looked at that sketch and said, we're going to have you do something else for Elizabeth Moon, but put sketch aside. And the next Honor Harrington book that comes up, we're going to have you do this cover for that book, because the honor books before that, I guess David was never happy with the representation of honor.
Well, that is correct. And I was just since I was back there digging through all of our old Webers, I saw some of those old covers before you came along, and there is a distinct likeness to Michael Jackson between
on one of the covers. Yeah.
Yes.
And they were all by excellent artists. I think Larry Schwinger did one. They had Gary Riddell, and these are all guys that have produced really superb covers over the years. And I've never been unlike a guy like Frank Frazetta or Ken Kelly, I've never been known as an artist who did sexy girls, which is a major selling point. But I think Honor was never supposed to be a sex bot. She was supposed to be really smart and a military genius. So when I got the opportunity to represent her, I didn't do any of those obvious things, but I still tried to make her attractive. So,
well, and I mean, you catch that intensity. That's the thing that your covers do with Weber. I think this is why I'm wondering when you're reading, because my favorite Mattingly covers are your big face covers, where basically it's honors. I mean, this is like the quintessential one right here. Uncompromising.
Yes, yeah,
it's just great, which is a wraparound. So it's got more to it than just that. But this is you just catch her character so well there, and then you have a bunch of missiles.
Right. That's actually a good example. There's no scene in the book that's exactly that, right? But it's all about honor. And she's basically put in this situation, at this point, she's kind of a diplomat. And so she's going around trying to work out the situation. But by showing her hands like this, and then all of the hammerhead ships coming out, I think that represented the book really well, even though it's not a particular scene in the book.
Yeah. Did you, maybe you don't remember, but how was the sketch of this? How did it go when you started it?
I always had that. I had that idea that Honor was going to have her hands out like this, but then it was like, well, what else is going to go on the cover? So, David, the hammerhead ships are a huge part of the Honor Harrington series. So I added those hammerhead ships on in the background. And filled out, also all of the honor covers at this point are wraparound covers because they're big books for Baen. But on the back cover, there's going to be all kinds of type on the back. So you don't want anything that goes on the back cover to be super important to the ultimate book.
Yeah, or else we'll just put a black screen on it and to make the type visible. So
that's right. You can't make it too busy. And actually, one of my covers for the honor series, it's it's one of my favorites. Is that one where Honor is walking across this platform that's above a city, but the back cover has all kinds of stuff on it in the background. And I had to work a long time on that cover, and of course it was all covered up by type, and it was when it was put out. So,
well, people can get the prints from you if they ever.
Yes, that's right. I sell prints of all of my work on Etsy and actually on my website, which is davidmattingly.com. I put all of the Honor covers up on Etsy because David has such a devoted audience. And I kind of like the covers to be seen without all of the extra stuff, all of the type over the top of them. So you can see all of the detail that I put into the final cover.
Yeah. Well, often we'll have one thing that I like is that one of my favorite cover designer we use, and one of my favorite cover designers usually does the Weber's, who's Carol Russo, and she creates the typefaces, and she sort of does it to your art, which I think is cool.
Yeah, no, I actually love working with Carol, and it's one of the interesting thing about Baen is that they've managed to keep a house look, so that when you see a Baen book on the shelf, you can tell it's a Baen book. And so many of the other companies have gone away from that look. My first client, Don Woolheim, he had these yellow spines on all of his books.
Oh yeah.
And after Don died, they went away from the yellow spine. And I know people criticized him for having that yellow spine, but if you like Daw books, you knew it was a Daw book by that yellow spine. Yeah. So it had kind of a house look.
Well, people certainly criticize Baen covers, but for all looking similar.
Well, I think a house look is a good thing. If
when
you
stop selling, we might. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got if you like Baen books, you'll be able to recognize a Baen book on the shelf. And at this point, all of the other publishing houses basically have all gone the same way, right? They all, I defy you to tell me a house look for Tor or for Bantam or any of these other companies.
It's something that we consciously do, and you are aware of.
Yeah, but well, and the audience is aware of too. So
yeah,
and
well, that's the most important thing. So a reader can tell, that they're getting one of ours. But nevertheless, we have a fantastic array of, and we're also known for illustrative covers that are not graphic designy things. We use, some great artists. You're just you're the big tip of a very large iceberg, put it that way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. A lot of houses have gone more and more to non-illustrative covers, and the bigger the name the author is, like Stephen King. If you had Stephen King publishing a new book, it's going to be Stephen King this big, and then you have maybe a tiny little area for the illustration. So I mean, I like illustrated covers. I grew up with the great Frank Frazetta and Roy Krenkel and these guys doing the Edgar Rice Burroughs covers, and they were obviously a huge influence on me.
Yeah. Well, I like when I see, say, a guy or a gal reading a Baen book on an airplane with a big old Mattingly cover. It makes me happy because I know they don't care if anybody thinks they're like, up on the latest New York trends. They just are after a good story with a beautiful cover. So it makes me happy as an editor because that's what I'm trying to provide them. So
yeah.
So onward. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, right. I forgot what I was going to say.
Onward with some art stuff from you, because we could talk about what makes Baen, but so you scan in what you've done, your concept. When do you show it to the art designer or the art director or Tony?
Well, the stuff that I scan in isn't tight enough. It's just indicating where figures will go. And so I'll work up a little bit more finished sketch. You know, I actually let me show you some sketches. I'll show you. Let's see here. I've got to get my cursor over here, and I can share a screen. And I'm going to share this one. And let's go over to my. You can see I've got huge amounts of hard drives over here. And I'm trying to think of a good cover. So you can see I've got folders for every project that I've ever done. And well, here's Alliance of Equals. And so here's the sketches for Alliance of Equals. And I had, this was Baen. I always turn in a slightly less, lower resolution than the actual sketch. So here's one sketch that I turned in, and actually, let me open these up so you can see them full resolution. Yeah, so this was the cover that Tony chose.
Well, wait a minute, David, I'm not seeing this.
Oh, you're not seeing it? I've got a bright, here we go.
You got to share it, yes.
There we go. Okay, now you're seeing it? Yeah.
Now I'm seeing it. Yes. Thank goodness.
So this is the sketch that Tony chose, and there's another one. It had that same spaceship with the big space station in the background, and there's another one where I just highlighted the spaceship and took that out, and then there was a scene that Sharon and Steve described that was exactly this scene. And this is exactly the description of the characters in it. And actually, I lifted this sort of for a later book. I changed the characters in it, but now that I have the sketch, I certainly keep it around. And if I find something that works out. So there's the sketch for Alliance for Equals. And then I'll show you the finish, and you'll see the difference between the two. Let's see, I'll just open up. Yeah, so you can see, I mean, the impact of the sketch should be basically the same. There's that, and I always add a little bit more bleed around the edge so that the designer can crop into the cover if they want to. And basically, I've just gone in and finished up all of the detailing inside of this.
So this is just something you show so you've done this amount of work for.
Yeah, and three of them get thrown away or saved to hopefully come through to another project. And sometimes I don't get the sketch that I really like doesn't get picked. That doesn't happen a lot, but occasionally it's like, why on earth did they pick that particular sketch? Let's see here. What else have I got? Exodus.
Let's see if I have Alliance of Equals sitting over here.
Exodus. Yeah. So here's.
This looks like perhaps the adaptation of that other sketch on.
Oh yeah, that's exactly it. Yep, and I like that because it. What's the name of that is Trader's Leap. Yeah, I can show you the sketches that I turned into that, and that's on a different hard drive. Let me open this, and these are basically all the covers I have done over the year. There's Trader's Leap, and I'll show you the sketches for that. Oh, and this one I only turned in, 3 sketches. This was kind of interesting. Yeah, there was this incredible scene in the book where these people are up on this cool hilltop, and it's this sort of psychedelic entry of these characters. And this was a little bit more literal. I actually showed you the characters arriving, but Tony didn't like those. She felt it gave away. This scene unfortunately happened at the very end of the book, and she felt that it was giving too much away. And this was a scene in the book. And you can see, I think I actually lifted the background from that other sketch. And then I'll show you the final on this. And this was a rare instance where Toni asked me for some corrections. She felt that the characters' costumes didn't look futuristic enough. And I actually really like that correction. I like how the final turned out. I added these incandescent armbands on the guy's outfit. And you can see, there's the sketch. I keep the sketch in there so I can refer to it while I'm working. And there's the final, and everything's, you know, fleshed out quite a bit more. And you can see there's all the figures. They're in one group. There's the foreground city. They're in another group. And let's see. Oh, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I hide my cat Orson in all of the covers.
I know this. Yeah.
And Orson right here is right there. She was a cat who died in 1994, but was very precious to me. This is one of the more obvious ones.
Because we actually always do a Mattingly cat search whenever in the office. So it's like, where do you put it? Well, it's got to be in there. So.
Yeah, I like, and this also on her boots, Toni had me add this little bit more futuristic look to it. And I think it certainly made it a better cover. So even though I go through all of this work, I then have the sketch. And if I get a project that things seem to be similar, I'll resubmit that sketch and change it around to match the book. So yeah, you do quite a bit of work just to give the art director some idea of what the final is going to look like.
Well, you do. I mean, there's some of these might as well be covers in themselves to me. they're so.
Well, you know, I actually on my website. Let's go to my website. My website is davidmattingly.com. And I like my sketches so much that I actually have a section called sketches. And these are sketches that I've done for projects over the years. And, you know, a lot of these were rejected, but they're nice enough that I like the final. And actually, this was one example. I did this for, I did a series of books called The Best of Trek. And, well, I guess that one isn't coming up. Uh-oh. Well, I've discovered something that's broken on my website. I've got to go back and fix this.
It may have something to do with Zoom.
But you can see these are like, this was a sketch for Doc Shee. This was a sketch for Wizard World. This was obviously for Explorers in Hell. I've submitted this several times, this idea of basing this on a painting by Delacroix of Liberty Leading the People, but I was never able to get that accepted. That was the actual accepted sketch for, I think it was Exodus. And here was another sketch I did for that. So you can go through and you can see I've fleshed out a lot more ideas than I've ever taken to a finish over the years. And then I've got these categories. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to look like. So this has pretty much every painting I've ever done, these different categories.
Yeah, I was just paging through that before we came on to look at some of the wonders. You have an entire Honor Harrington section.
Yes, I do, because that's one of the more popular ones. So
there's that.
There we go. Yeah, that's that. I've done something like 18 covers for David and Honor Harrington. Yeah, and there's another set of them. So yeah, I mean, if you're interested in my work, I give you fairly high resolution versions. I should also mention on this cover, which is one of my favorites, this was for Beginnings, Worlds of Honor. And I have a friend who's a comic book artist named Paul Chadwick. And a lot of times when I've done sketches, I'll send them to him at the same time I send them to Tony. And he's always trying to get me to work more dynamically. When I did the sketch for this guy wasn't leaning forward as much. And Paul, in his note back to me, he actually took my sketch and photoshopped it and made this guy lean forward more. And I think it really helps. It makes the cover look more dynamic.
Yeah, that's an action-packed cover.
Yeah. So let's see. Well, I don't have the sketches for that. Yeah.
When do you decide, okay, I'm sending it to the art director?
Oh, when I have,
here's the deadline, I better do it.
When I have 4 sketches that I'm satisfied with. Let me unshare so I can come back. Yeah. I mean, I've occasionally I'll do 4 sketches and not particularly like anything that I've done. And I always want to submit something that I'm proud of for the final. So, once I've fleshed out 4 sketches and I have something that I'm happy with, then I'll send them into Tony.
And so she'll come back and she'll say, go with that one, or
yes, she will. And on rare occasion, she's had art directorial touches, like on that Alliance of Equals. She had me make the two main figures have more futuristic costumes. One of my favorite covers I did for Jim Baen for Doc Shee. And Doc Shee, I originally turned it in. Let me see if I can find that cover.
I think we have a print of that hanging in the office, by the way.
Anyway. Yeah, he's got I did that as a tribute to James Bama, who's another one of my heroes, and he did all of the Doc Savage covers. So I was doing a riff on Doc Savage. So I turned in the sketch for that, and Jim Baen said, you got to make the guy's shirt red. And I think that's totally what made the cover, pop and work as well as it did. So yeah, I like art director input when it's as good as Baen Books traditionally has been. I've never had any art direction from Baen that I didn't think improved the cover.
Yeah, so you're like, what are they thinking?
Yeah, well, that's uncomfortable. I mean, I once had a client.
I might have to take Orson out of this.
Yeah, I had a client once who every cover I did, they had me make changes in it, and I got into the habit of this was back in the days when I would hand deliver paintings, because I live in Hoboken, right outside of New York City, and I would just take my paints in with me because it was so much easier to just sit there, finish all of the corrections that they had in mind, and then go home rather than go home, make the fixes, come back, show it to them. They'd request more changes. Really? Yeah. So.
And did you give them to them wet or?
Well, I used to work in acrylic, so acrylics dry really quickly.
They were done.
Yeah, I mean, with oil paintings, yeah, you'd have to wait a day or two. I mean, there were famous stories of Frazetta, because he always worked in oil, and he would use a dryer, like a Japan dryer, so that his oil paints would dry in 2 or 3 days, and then or 2 or 3 hours, and then he had ways of sending in an almost wet painting. But all of that was avoided because all of my analog work was done both in acrylic and gouache, and both of those are very fast drying. Acrylic dries in a matter of minutes.
So you've got the thing, you've got the approval on the concept and the sketch. What do you do?
I shoot models. A lot of times I'll shoot myself, but as I've gotten a little bit older, it's harder for me to use myself. And since I've grown a beard, I've thought about shaving off this beard so I could use myself more consistently, or I use my wife. On that Alliance of Equals covers, I actually used 2 kids in the neighborhood. for it. And they were perfect. And, I pay them. And then I'll just, go in and paint and paint and paint until the thing looks like it's a finished cover. And then I'll turn it into Tony. So
what do you mean by paint and paint and paint?
In Photoshop, since I have this digitizing tablet, I will paint. Generally I don't just plop photographs in there. If I can find a photographic element that'll work well, like lighted windows or a sky, I'll certainly use that. I don't have an objection to it. But most of my work, does involve some amount of painting in it, even though I'm working digitally.
Does anything become physical again, or is this all in the computer at this point?
All of my illustration work is in the computer. As I've, I teach at School of Visual Arts, and there's a wonderful oil painter there named Steve Assell. And I've been taking his painting class, and that's all in oils. And I never traditionally worked in oils. I always worked in acrylics, but just the luxury of having a live model there, and being able to sit with the model. There's really nothing like painting from a live model. Painting from a photograph, there's a reason why all of these great artists like Sargent and Rembrandt, well, they didn't have photographs back in Rembrandt's day, but they work from live models, because there's a certain magic of just sitting there with a live model. So I've gotten a lot more interested in analog painting again. But for illustration today, I know there are a few guys that are still doing analog paintings. Jim Gurney, I know, still does paintings. I'm trying to think of illustrators. There aren't a lot of illustrators.
So what do you do physically? Do you use a mouse to do this?
Oh, no.
You're doing
no. This is I have what's called a Wacom tablet, and I think I can show this. This is the medium-sized one. I actually don't have the huge-sized one, because if you're working on a particular area, you can zoom in on that particular area and then use the digitizing tablet. And the great thing about this is, with a mouse, you only get one level of pressure. But with the digitizing tablet, you can actually, press very lightly and get a very light mark, and then you press heavier and you get a heavier mark. Or you can set the brush to be very thin if you don't press down very hard, and then be much thicker if you press down hard. Or you can actually turn both of those on at the same time. So Photoshop has become quite a versatile tool for painting. It's very similar to physical analog painting. And in fact, one of the funny things is, when I'm sitting there painting a live model with actual paint, I'll sometimes think undo when I've done something I didn't like. And of course, you can't undo in an analog environment. A lot of times when I'm doing a painting digitally,
I found myself swiping manuscript pages sometimes to try to get them to roll up.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
When I'm reading, but anyway,
yeah, that's funny, because all of this stuff in the digital era. When I first started painting inside of Photoshop, it had only one layer and it had one undo. And now my paintings will be 100 layers. And sometimes I'll try something and I'll look up, and I always have my undo set to 100, because if I try something and it turns out to be really bad, then you can go all the way up to those 100 undos and get back to the state where you liked it, and then try something else. So yeah, there's a lot of.
Do you have on a Photoshop that you're working on? You say like dozens and dozens here.
Oh yeah. As my computer has gotten faster, I'm able to work at a higher resolution, and I'm also able to use a lot of different layers. And one of the nice things about Photoshop is you can also use transfer modes. So like in Uncompromising Honor, those streaks of light that are coming out behind the spaceships, those were all in screen mode. And basically it takes anything, it takes the background color and it combines it with whatever you're laying over the top of it. You can do a lot of these effects in analog painting, but they're much harder to do And Photoshop also allows you to, like they have 26 different transfer modes inside of Photoshop. And sometimes I don't know exactly what I want, and I'll go, I'll try multiply, I'll try overlay, I'll try screen, I'll try lighten, and all of them give you a slightly different effect. So it's much easier to create, very unusual lighting effects than.
I believe that I've seen you teach a lot, but you also have some online stuff. Is it Lydia something you've done? You did a series of Photoshop courses that I saw some of them. They were just amazing. I mean, you're an amazing teacher, and it shows people things that you just never thought of with this software. You've like taken it to the ultimate levels, right? I mean,
well, thank you. Yeah, no, I've worked in Photoshop for 28 years. And then before that, I had 20 years of painting analog. And, I'm very grateful that I had that time before computers were available, where I was forced to learn to paint and draw and all of that stuff. I think that it gets harder and harder to develop those talents unless you have to.
Where can where exactly can, and if anybody ever wanted to take a Mattingly, one of these courses, they still around?
If you buy a membership in lynda.com, my course is called The Fundamentals of Digital Matte Painting. And I basically take you through, you do a painting, and I take you through all of the basics, which is perspective and tone, and then using photographic textures to flesh out this castle. And then you can project that onto raw geometry. And it's one of the reasons why matte painting has stayed viable today, is it's very hard to actually, I have you do a castle, but it's very hard to create a castle in 3D and light it and do all of that stuff. It's much easier for an artist to produce a painting of a castle. But in the old days,
explain what a matte painting is, just to those that don't know, probably.
Well, when I got into the business, a matte painting was done on glass, and you would paint something that would block out your plate. For instance, in the black hole, whenever you saw the top of the Cygnus, or you saw a grand panorama of the interior of the spaceship, those were all matte paintings. And you can still have live action actors. You can have, an actor walking into the bottom of the plate like this, but all the rest of it would be painting. But the problem was, when I got into business and you did it on glass, it was very, it was almost impossible to move the camera. And there's so much emphasis on a moving camera in today's movies. If you go see a Michael Bay movie, he won't have a single shot in the movie where the camera is locked. And so that creates parallax between the objects that are in the foreground and the objects that are in the background. And a painting can't have that. But with camera projection, you basically project your painting onto geometry, and then you create a second camera, and then you move that camera, and that creates parallax within your scene. So it looks like the rest of the production footage. One of the ways, right up until about 1990, you could tell a matte painting in a show is a matte painting generally was locked. There were, you had the camera on the tripod and it didn't move at all. And then, as directors were moving their cameras more and more, and there's this thing in cinema today where the camera, it moves around a little bit and there's a little bit of jitter on it. And I guess that's just to interject a little bit more motion into the frame. All very hard to do with traditional matte painting, and this thing called camera projection is what has kept matte painting still used in productions today. When you watch Game of Thrones, when you see a castle, a lot of times they didn't have those castles and they had an artist paint them. But you'll notice there's still some motion in the frame, and the castle will parallax against the sky that's behind it. All of that is because of camera projection. So yeah, if you buy a membership in lynda.com, you can go through my 5 modules on that. And the one module I'm particularly proud of is perspective, because I think a lot of young artists don't have, like I had an entire semester of perspective when I was in art school with a wonderful teacher named Ted Yunkin, who has since passed away. When I talk to my students about perspective today, they haven't ever had any perspective training at all. And inside of Photoshop, perspective is actually quite a bit easier to do than the way I used to do it with an analog painting. You can set up grid parts and then set up your vanishing points. So yeah, I would encourage anyone who has any interest in being an artist, look at that perspective section so that you can get a good grounding in how you create the physical world.
Yeah. Well, all right. So apart from the technical stuff, so you are now working on what's going to be the final cover. How do you stay inspired by it? How do you get new ideas as you go along? And I mean, I it's hard for me to ask the right question. I know how I would ask a writer how they would construct a scene or something like that. But
well, I learned the hard way that if I have a sketch approved, I generally try and stick by that sketch. And when I was young and just getting into this business, I did a cover for Judy Lynn Del Rey, and I got inspired along the way, and I made some fairly substantial changes from the sketch. And she rejected that cover. And she said, David, before you make any changes in the final cover, you're going to have to send me a new sketch in order to do that. So generally, I stick very close to the sketch that I've given the art director. Or if I all of a sudden have a brainstorm, I'll mock it up so that they can see exactly what they're going to be getting. In the case of this rejected cover, I liked my original cover so much better that I basically went back and painted an all new cover for that book. And the cover that I felt was much better is still hanging in our dining room. It's one of my favorites. So, I had the option of painting over it in order to make it like the original sketch I'd done. I didn't want to do that. So,
yeah. Well, but you do bring the sketch to life.
Oh yeah, it's got to be a lot more detailed.
And it's detail. But even in such intricate work, surely inspiration comes in, or the creative, because I can't do it. So, and most people can't.
Well, there's you also generally I do my sketches at a lower resolution. My finals are say 3,000 pixels high by 1,800 pixels wide, something like that. And if I did my sketches at that resolution, it really slows down my ability to make big changes. If I'm going to make big changes, I'm going to do it in the sketch. But I'm rezzing it up. It's got to be much more detailed than the sketch. And like I said, if I suddenly have a brainstorm, and that has happened on occasion. I'm trying to think of the last cover I did for Baen where I made a huge change. But I now don't want to surprise the client with a completely changed cover that looks different from the sketch that I submitted.
My question is more like the regular stuff that you're not gonna make big changes on. What is your mindset as you're doing? I mean, because it's hours and hours, it's days, right?
It is, yeah.
Of this work, and it begins to come alive in a way. Are you in a Zen state? Are you?
Actually, when I'm finishing up a cover, I've gotten into the habit of listening to audiobooks while I work. I can't listen to audiobooks while I'm sketching because my mind has to be engaged, and I'm trying to think up images for it. But once I have the image, all that I'm trying to do is add more detail, flesh it out so that it looks as realistic as I possibly can make it. And then I want that creative part of my brain kind of distracted. So I listen to, I have a membership in Audible, and I've listened to their books while I'm working, and it sort of distracts me during
So
that time.
you take your conscious off of it, and you just let your your instincts and all this incredible experience that you go in a way. Is that?
Yes, yeah, and actually, yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for years, and but what you want to get, the point you want to get in when you're doing a finished cover is that zone where you basically sit down to work and then you look up and it's 4 hours later. All of this work has been done on the cover, right? I mean, artists for many years have talked about this zone you can get into. And it's one of the things that I worry about with my students. You can't have a lot of distractions. I mean, I know some artists watch television while they work, and I can't do that because, the television has moving information coming at me. But, audiobooks, that's perfect for sort of taking my mind off of that. And it's much easier for me to get into the zone if I'm listening to a book that I really like.
So you turn it in, and what if sometimes they hate it ever, or do they generally, that doesn't happen much anymore?
Well, I mean, hopefully when I've delivered the sketch, it's given them enough information about what the finished cover is going to look like that they don't reject it
Right.
outright.
And you can say, well, I gave you exactly what you wanted.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you've made substantial changes to it, the client has every right to say, well, this wasn't what I asked for. And then they certainly can reject it. I've done something like 2,000 covers, and I had that experience where I had to repaint a cover because I liked my version of it. And then I had one cover that was never used, and I'm not entirely sure why that was done. But it was for a book about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and I'm not exactly, I'm more known for science fiction. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was this woman who had all of this proof that there's life after death.
Oh, that's right. She was.
Yeah, because so many people have had a near-death experience, and they all experience this tunnel of light. It was a really interesting book, and I tried to do a good cover for it, but I'm a sciance fiction artist. That's really where my head lives most of the time.
You could use. I would think that one Liaden sketch with the two people appearing, that'd be pretty good for that.
Yeah. Well, that was done much later. I think this book cover that wasn't used was done sometime in the mid 80s.
Yeah, maybe if they wanted it, the reissue to sell, they could come back to you and say they're sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I mean, it is the case that that the covers are 1/3 to 1/2 as important sometimes as for the sale of the thing, and to set not just the money, but to set the reader's expectations, their mind on, oh, this is the story I want, to spend 18-20 hours with, which is what they're going to do when they read a book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the cover is basically a selling tool, and I've occasionally been at conventions with authors who, is like, look at this cover, isn't it terrible? And I'd look at it and was like, no, I think that's a really good cover. And the author would say, it doesn't represent my book very well. Well, who cares? I mean, ultimately, if you've got a good cover that people are going to want to pick up, then they're going to read your book and they'll know what it's all about. But a lot of times an author wants a cover that exactly replicates a scene in their book, and that isn't necessarily the best-selling tool. There was a famous story that Michael Whalen told, that he did a cover for a book, and I can't remember what the name of it is right now, but he was given a scene description. And so he went ahead and he illustrated the scene. He didn't actually read the book. And when the book came out, he read the book and discovered that one of the characters only had one hand. And of course, he'd done the character with both hands. I try and avoid mistakes like that, and you can only do that if you get to read the manuscript.
Yeah, and David Weber is incredibly pleased with your covers, and I know that you do ask him things like, "What medals does Honor have on?"
Well, the Honor Harrington community
yeah.
is extremely concerned that you get all of that stuff right. And some authors don't want to have anything to do with an illustrator. And David has been very generous with his time and willing to tell me, like what decorations, like when I was doing the star that Honor wears around her neck. It's an award. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I needed to know exactly what that looked like, because I knew that Honor fans would know all of those details. So I'm sure I've made some pretty major mistakes on my covers, but it isn't for want of trying and going back and forth with David trying to get the details right. Some authors are not as detailed in their universes as David is. Isaac Asimov was famous for not really describing a lot of what his characters looked like, and so there's a lot of diversity or changes as they change cover artists as to how that universe looks. Mm-hmm. But you really can't say that about David Weber's books. He's very specific about what the universe looks like.
Sometimes entire paragraphs of specificity. So David will be the first to admit, although he says everything he puts in there has something to do with the story, never extraneous. So when you turn it in, and then do you even look at the what happens with when you interact with the publishing company as they make the cover?
Nothing. I when I was a young illustrator, I was extremely concerned about the reproduction of my covers, and it's a CMYK process. It won't capture all of the subtlety of your original painting, and I've stopped worrying about that. I mean, I can't have any control over the printing of it, and occasionally I feel like the type has overwhelmed my cover. I wish they'd put a little less type on it, but then I realize this is something to sell the book. It isn't really an avenue for people to look at all of the detail in my cover. So yeah, I generally, I've kept copies of all of the books I've done. You can see on the top 3 shelves of this. So I'm proud enough of my production over the years that I have kept copies of them. But you can't exactly go back to the publisher and say, I'm not happy with the reproduction on my cover. There's a famous story that you may have heard that Walt Disney pursued the author of Mary Poppins for many years, and she never wanted to have a movie made of her stories. And on the night of the premiere, she came up to Walt and said, Walt, I have some ideas on how we can make this movie better. And Walt Disney said, that train done left the station. So yeah, that when the book cover comes out, that train done left the station. And occasionally I'll look at my covers and wish I'd done something better or different, but it's a finished cover. And
I've got your favorites now. Do you have any?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely have some favorites. Actually, one of my favorites is that Honor Among Enemies covers. I really love that. A cover I did right when I moved to New York for Jim, that was the cover for Baen Books' Orion, and it's based on a painting by another artist. You can hopefully see that. And let's see, I like that Shaper's cover with the giant eyeballs. I like the Beginnings cover. Yeah, I certainly have some covers that I like. When you come into my home, if I have a cover up, I really like that. If it's in my drawer, it's probably something, that I wished I'd done better.
Hmm.
But one of the things about being an illustrator is, I hope to hit it out of the park every time and have it be something that I'm really proud on. And every cover, I basically give an equal amount of work to. It isn't as though if I put more work into a cover, it's going to turn out to be a better one. And every year I'll do maybe 5 covers that I think are really, really good. I'll do maybe 10 covers that I think are okay, and then a couple of covers that just didn't turn out all that well. So it's one of the nice things about being an illustrator is you're not stuck on one project, and you realize that as your production goes on, some of it's going to be really good, and some of it's not going to be really good. But look at directors.
Yeah. Do you work on more than one project simultaneously, or do you just do them?
I don't now, because I'm also teaching. I teach 4 classes at School of Visual Arts and Pratt Institute. So when I was back being a full-time illustrator, I would work on multiple covers. But it's kind of hard to switch back and forth between covers. And I also keep my schedule. I don't load it up as much as I used to with cover commitments, just so that I can hopefully produce something I'm proud of and have enough time to do it in between the other stuff I have to do.
And people could, if they want some of your art, they can get it at the website. Do you sign those prints? Or?
I do. Yeah, they're all signed in silver ink, and they're printed on Epson art velvet paper, which is acid free. So hopefully they're not going to deteriorate over the years. So yeah, go to my website and you can find almost every cover I've ever done. I've noticed there's a few that I don't quite have up there, but you can look at sketches and see everything that I've done over the years.
What else might you want to add to this exploration of making a book cover? I mean, we could talk about this quite a while. Of course, there's depths far beyond this, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm a fan of illustration. I love illustrated covers, and one of the sad things is a lot of illustration has gone to photography, and that's one of the things that Baen Books has been bucking the trend of. Among the highest paid illustrators in years before were guys who did romance illustrations, and they were getting up into the budgets, closer to $10,000 for a painting. There's actually a wonderful painter named Pinot who used to just do romances. I challenge you to go to a stand now and find a romance that isn't just a photograph of a guy with a six-pack, and maybe a girl in the picture. So that market has completely disappeared. But science fiction, because it's very hard to find photographs that you could put on the cover of a science fiction book, they still use illustrators. And I'm certainly grateful that I chose to be in that field rather than in some of the other ones where illustration has gone the way of photographs.
I just also think illustration says story more than anything. But
yeah. Well, there's Robert McGinnis. He did all of the detective novels, and I love his work. And they decided that Bob would shoot models for everything, and the art directors decided, well, why does he get to shoot photographs of these scantily clad ladies and then turn them into paintings? So they decided, well, we're just going to take the photographs ourselves. So I think these were for the Mickey Spillane book. So there was a time where you just had photographs of these 2 models, sort of in the same sort of scene that Bob would paint. But when you look at Bob McGinnis's paintings for the scenes, they were so much better. They were so much more evocative of the books, and the photographs, they were just sort of dead. They didn't capture the impact of the book at all. And I think that's what illustration at its best can do.
Absolutely. And you are the best at it, David
Well,
Mattingly.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for talking with us today about
Well,
it.
great, Tony. This was wonderful. Thank you for making this so easy. And I look forward to seeing this.
Here is another entry in David Weber's Honor Harrington series masterpiece, Uncompromising Honor. Honor keeps her promise. The Solarian League. For hundreds of years they have borne the banner of human civilization, but the bureaucratic mandarins who rule today's League are corrupt and looking for scapegoats. They've decided the upstart Star Kingdom of Manticore must be annihilated. Uncompromising courage. Honor Harrington has worn the Star Kingdom's uniform for half a century. Very few know war the way Honor Harrington does. So far, hers has been a voice of caution. But now the Mandarins have committed atrocities such as the galaxy has not known in 1,000 years. They have finally killed too many of the people Honor Harrington loves. Uncompromising vengeance. Now Honor Harrington is coming for the Solarian League, and hell is riding in her wake. And now, David Weber's Uncompromising Honor.
George Benton Tower, City of Old Chicago, Old Earth, Sol System. Well, so much for our wonderful secret weapon, Malachi Abruzzi said bitterly. How the hell am I supposed to sell this as the decisive victory we needed? It's not a complete disaster, Nathan McCartney objected. It looks like Asta worked perfectly. If they'd seen it coming before the last stage lit off, they'd have stopped any of them from getting through, and they didn't. Oh, that makes it much better, Abruzzi half sneered. Now you're telling me I'm supposed to tell the public we fired off 1,200 of these wonderful new missiles, the other side didn't even see them coming until the last second, and we still managed to take out one, count them, Nathan, one of our 11 primary objectives. He shook his head in disgust. I'm pretty good. Hell, I could sell ice on Niflheim. I don't think I can sell this, though. No one expects miracles, Malachi, Innocenty Kolokoltsov told him. We'll just have to do the best we can with what we've got. That's reassuring, Abruzzi muttered. Then he shook himself. I really need Kingsford to give me something to work with. I'm sure he will, as soon as he can. Abruzzi snorted, but he also sat back in his chair, arms folded, and Kolokoltsov tried to be grateful for small mercies. Fabius had been almost as big a disaster as Kingsford had privately warned him it might. Unlike the CNO's worst-case assumption, based on discovering that the Mantis' FTL system defense missiles were already fully operational, almost 10% of Vincent Capriotti's battle cruisers had survived. SLNS Quebec had not been one of them, however, and the remnants of TF-790 had reached Sol less than 11 hours ago. So far, no one outside the Navy and the Mandarins knew they had, or had any idea the Solarian League had once again suffered catastrophic losses. It would be a while before Kingsford could provide any sort of comprehensive after-action report or meaningful analysis of the attack's results. Without Capriotti, or for that matter, any of the task group flagships, just pulling together the sensor data was likely to take days. What he called the hot wash analysis suggested Abruzzi's dismal summary of Capriotti's accomplishments was likely to hold up, though. Kingsford's face had been bitter on Kolokoltsov's comm display as he described the impeller wedges which had interposed themselves between the Astas and their targets. We'd have gotten better results going after something farther from the planet, the CNO had said heavily. We didn't expect that wall of impeller wedges, and we had to be so careful about our targeting commands to avoid civilian casualties that the birds' tactical options were too limited to work around and get behind them, between them and the planet, for an unobstructed shot. We did find that one hole, and it looks like we probably killed at least a dozen of the ships they were using, more likely twice that many. But if I had to guess, they were freighters. Probably unmanned freighters, drones. So, aside from the nano farm, I think it's likely we didn't get another damned thing. I'm sorry, Mr. Senior Permanent Undersecretary. My people tried. Yes, they did, Admiral, Kolokoltsov thought now. And a hell of a lot of them died trying. But Malachi's right. We can't sell this as the win we needed. Anything more on that data anomaly? McCartney asked. No, Kolokoltsov shrugged. Kingsford says his people at Operational Analysis are working on it, but so far, data anomaly is as far as they've gotten. He shrugged again. Frankly, I think Kingsford's pretty much of the opinion that it's a sensor glitch. Only 2 of Capriotti's recon drones even think they saw it, whatever it was. Good, Abruzzi said with bitter amusement. At least I won't have to explain that one away. Last thing we need is for people to think the Manties are still producing new secret weapons, especially when ours all seem to suck wind. I have to say, Omasupe Quartermain put in, her tone as subdued and anxious as her expression, that I'm a lot more worried about how the Manties are going to react to this than I am about what we tell the newsies. Trust Omasupe to cut to the chase, Kolokoltsov reflected. And she had a point. The attack on Beowulf had upped the ante all around, and it was unlikely the Manties were very pleased about it. Still, there were a few glimmers in the darkness. Even from Kingsford's current partial analysis, it was obvious McCartney was right. The Manties had never even seen Asta coming until the final stages went active. That meant the weapon had performed almost exactly as advertised. If not for the freighters they'd managed to interpose, the strike would have been just as devastating as anyone could have hoped, and the fact that at least some of their technology had worked perfectly, that the Manties' monopoly on superior weapons wasn't absolute after all, was at least a little reassuring. According to Kingsford and Vice Admiral Kendrick, Systems Development Command and Technodyne were working on half a dozen other projects, which should begin yielding results sometime within the next 8 to 12 T-months. How good those results would be was an unknown, but if Asta was representative, they might just provide a genuine equalizer, especially if they were employed en masse. And the preliminary vote on the taxation amendment went our way overwhelmingly, Kolokoltsov reminded himself. If Nang and Tyrone Reed are right, it'll sail through on the final vote week after next, too. If that happens, we'll have all the money we need to buy anything systems development wants. We just have to hang on long enough for that to happen, and the Manties are friggin' history. He reminded himself of that firmly, very firmly, and somewhere under that reassurance, he heard the lonely sound of whistling in a cemetery.
That was another entry in the complete serialization of Uncompromising Honor by David Weber. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. And a new shipment of paints based on human oils in wry gesture of camaraderie from the planet of acrylic-based life forms, plus thanks and praise for David Mattingly, longtime Baen cover illustrator and the artist for the Honor Harrington series. Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.